What's good, family? All right, what's good, family? Welcome to another episode of the Black Independent. Got a good show for you dealing with Candace Owens. A lot of people have been addressing her this week when she was at the hearing for um, the House hearing on the rise of right wing hate groups and white racism or racism, right? And particularly, I wanted to deal with her claims that she made concerning the Southern strategy, right? If you haven't heard about it, the Southern strategy is a method that was said to be developed by the Republican Party um, sometime I guess probably in the late 60s, early 70s or so, and it continued on till until now. And basically, this strategy was or is a strategy in which, if you're not familiar with the history of the Republican Party, they used to be friendly. They used to be a friendly party towards black people. Now things are seem to be reversed. Now it seems that the Democrats are allegedly the more friendlier party to blacks and minorities. Of course, we'll deal with that as well. I dealt with that in my other video, Neither Party Is Mine, Not the Jackass or the Elephant, where I showed that in reality, although the Democrats may seem on the superficial level to be, you know, the party that's supposedly willing to help minorities or blacks or whatever, that the reality is different. You know, they practice a different type of hindrance to the black community in benign neglect and really getting our votes and doing nothing. But we addressed that already, and we'll do another show where we talk about that in full. But as I said, right now I wanted to address um, this claim that Candace Owens made about the Southern strategy being a myth and that it never happened. And so, as I was saying, the Republican Party used to be the party that was the friendly party towards black people. Matter of fact, it was one of the first parties to accept black candidates, and many black candidates had been elected when blacks, after slavery and things like that. Many blacks were part of the Republican Party. But unfortunately, something changed after about I guess 1968 or so, and the Democrats were the party of, Malcolm X used to call them the Dixiecrats. They were the party of the Klan. They were the party of the segregationists and so forth and so on. But somewhere down the line, they seemed to change their attitude and, I guess I would say, seem to be friendlier to blacks. And all of a sudden, black people just switched over and give the majority of their support to the Democratic Party. But why did this happen? Well, the Republican Party made a change themselves. When the Democrats seemed to switch to a more friendlier party, more race-friendly party, the Republicans, seemed to switch over in the sense that they switched their methodology. Instead of, being the party that had a lot of black, that seemed to be friendly to black people, they wanted to court the, more of the white vote, more of the white Southern vote in particular. And so they came up with a strategy known as the Southern strategy, in which they would cater to and appeal to the white bigots, the former segregationists of the South. And pretty much seems to be their methodology since then. Most black people are not fond of the Republican Party, and that is one of the reasons why, as they've done through the years. Many things that they've done through the years to show that they're really not trying to cater, or they're really not trying to reach out to the black vote at all, in fact. Okay, and of course, many black people are turned off by the Conservative Party. Even if they try to put a black face in front of it, like they did with Candace Owens or other black Republicans, Herman Cain and such, that we see that you know, when you have these type of people, they're condescending, right? They're condescending towards black. Instead of talking about how to help blacks, they almost sound like a white racist in blackface, right? And so, of course, this turns off black people. But again, in particular with this Southern strategy, this was a strategy where, as I said, they decided they were going to try to get more of the white appeal to more white voters by, unfortunately, using coded racist language where they could express themselves, and you know, the bigots, the white racists and bigots and such, whether they were Klan members or, you know, the people who would not consider themselves members of the to the extreme, but still harbored such ideas. They could cater to them and get their vote and win. And many times, this is how the Republicans have won. Most recent, of course, is Donald Trump, right? Most recent is Donald Trump. You know, he definitely used a form of the Southern strategy to win his election. And this is why we see that we have many of those who support him are indeed the crowd that the Southern strategy was meant to get. Many of the white bigots, the white nationalists, the white racists, the Klan and such, we see that, you know, when he was running, they definitely expressed their support of him. And, you know, and of course the coded language, sometimes he wasn't so coded. He was outright with his language, referring to Mexicans as rapists and drug dealers and killers and such. And the Muslim ban from banning Muslims coming to the country. You know, these are the things that appeal to building the wall. These are all things that appeal to white nationalists, white racists, white supremacists, right? And so it worked. It worked. You know, of course, whites are the majority of the country, and you can appeal to the majority. And unfortunately, you know, having to use bigotry and racism, it worked. It worked. Even surprisingly, the majority of white women voted for Trump, right? We get this image that, you know, the women, you know, they were against, you know, with the Me Too movement and sexual harassment and all that stuff like that. But, you know, more white women voted for Trump than they did Hillary. So that tells us something. That tells us something right there, you know. And none of that turned them off. The recording of him talking about grabbing women by the pussy and, you know, they let you do it when you're rich and all this stuff like that. That didn't dissuade white women from voting for him. The majority of white women who voted from voting for Trump. That didn't bother them, right? They went for the appeal. They went for the racist appeal. That appealed to them. So white women wanted that, you know, I guess the image of the strong white nationalist man, as well as the women did. So let that be a lesson too to the black women, black feminists, that, you know, these white women, they're not really in line with you. But let's get to it. So like I said, that was her claim. Her claim was that the Southern strategy was a myth, she said. She said the Southern strategy was a myth. She says it never happened, you know. That it never happened and that it was a myth. That it never happens, shockingly. Right? So, yeah. So let's address it. You know, it's the Southern strategy is no doubt real. If you want to see where she made the remarks, at the hearing. Matter of fact, let's see if we can pull it up. Hold on. Let's see if we can pull up her statements so you guys can hear.
Time has expired. Ms. Owens.
That was unfair.
It was not unfair.
I was the victim of a hate crime when I was in high school. That's something that very few people know about me, because the media and the journalists and the left not to see in black people. I'm a Democrat. I support the President of the United States, and I advocate for things that are actually. I'm honored to be here today in front of you all because the person sitting behind me is my 75 passion and my work ethic all comes from the man that is sitting behind me. And white nationalism held real meaning under the Democrat Party's Jim Crow laws. My grandfather's first job was given to him in the South. My grandfather has picked cotton. It's going to shock the committee, but not once, not in a single breath of a conversation did my grandfather tell me that I could not do something because of my heritage. I learned about faith in God, adult today, that in good conscience would make growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election. Here are some things we never hear. 75% of the black boys in California don't meet state reading standards. In inner cities like Baltimore, say is that brown people need to be scared growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want, a single adult today that in good conscience would make the white nationalism does not do any of those things that I just brought up. Democrat policies did. Let me be clear. The hearing today is not about white nationalism or hate crimes. It's about fear-mongering, power, and control. It's a preview of a Democrat 2020 election strategy, same as the Democrat 2016 election strategy. They blame Facebook, they blame Google, they blame Twitter. Really, they blame the birth of social media, which has disrupted their monopoly on minds. They called this hearing because they believe that if it wasn't for social media, voices like mine would never exist, that my movement Blexit, which is inspiring black Americans to leave the Democrat Party, would have never come about, and they certainly believe that Donald Trump would not be in office today. Looking on the next thing to focus on now that the Russian collusion hoax has fallen apart. What they won't tell you about the statistics and the rise of white nationalism is that they've simply changed the data set points by widening the definition of hate crimes and upping the number of reporting agencies that are able to report on them. What I mean to say is that they are manipulating statistics. The goal here is to scare blacks, Hispanics, gays, and Muslims into helping them censor dissenting opinions, ultimately into helping them regain control of our country's narrative, which they feel that they lost. They feel that President Donald Trump should not have beat Hillary. If they actually were concerned about white nationalism, they would be holding hearings on Antifa, a far-left, violent, white, a group of black and Hispanic police officers. If they were serious about the rise of hate crimes, they may perhaps be examining themselves and the hate that they have drummed up in this country. Every 4 years, the black community is offered handouts and fear. Handouts and fear. Reparations and white nationalism. This is the Democrat preview. Of course, society is not perfectible. We've heard testimony of that today. There are pockets of evil that exist, and those things are horrible, and they should be condemned. But I believe the legacy and the ancestry of black America. I want to talk about real issues in black America. I want to talk about real issues in this country and real concerns. The biggest scandal, this is my last sentence, in American politics is that Democrats have been conning minorities into the belief that we are perpetual victims, all but ensuring our failure. Racial division and class warfare are central to the Democrat Party platform. They need blacks to hate whites, the rich to hate the poor, and soon enough it'll be the tall hate.
Meet the Landers.
All right. Let's see. I couldn't find. Let me see. Here we go. People are saying that she spoke about this. I wanted to get the comment where she exactly talked about the Southern strategy. You may have seen it already. But again, she spoke about the Southern strategy, claiming that it was a myth and that it never existed. But unfortunately for her, the facts say otherwise. Right? Unfortunately for her, the facts say otherwise. The facts show that indeed the Southern strategy was and is real, Candace. So you claiming that you claiming that it's a myth and a lie. I mean, basically, it just shows that she is what people call her. You're cooning, Candace. It's plain for all to see that they and it was just. I mean, come on. They sent you, of all people, to be the person to counter the claims that there's a rise in white nationalism. And you took the job. You were willing to take the job, Candace, and downplay it by saying, look, I'm black and the Republicans sent me. So therefore, I guess this was like a symbolic way of showing that, oh, well, look, it's not real. But unfortunately, it's not going to work, Candace. You lied about the Southern strategy. You're wrong about the Southern strategy. So look, everybody, let's go ahead and listen to one of the consultants of the Republican Party, by the name of Lee Atwater, and how he talked about this very strategy, that it's very real, and that how he, helped advise Republican candidates, presidential candidates, etc., on how to use it. So here he's speaking about it in his own words, so you can hear it for yourself. Let's take a listen. By the way, I'm using this under the Fair Use Act, which allows persons or organizations to use footage from other outlets or publications in order for educational purposes, for criticisms, commentaries, etc. Okay, so I'm using this under the Fair Use Act. So let's take a listen to Lee Atwater as he talks and describes the reality of the Southern strategy, which Candace lied about in order to cover for, and try to downplay the reality of the GOP's use of this racist methodology, and to try to downplay the reality of the rise of white nationalism and white racism and white supremacy in America. That is the ultimate example, Candace, what you did. Shame on you for taking that, for them to let you put you up there to try to dissuade and deflect and distract away from the reality of the rise of white nationalism, and how most white nationalists and white racists lean towards the conservative and Republican Party. So that's really a shame. But here, let's listen to Mr. Lee Atwater prove you wrong, Candace.
Approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes.
Does everybody understand what he's saying? He's saying, I mean, it's clear what he's saying. He's saying back in the days, right? You in the 50s or whatever, you could be outright. You could outright say, the N-word, or you could outright say, look, you got to stop these blacks from coming in our neighborhoods or getting this or whatever. You could say that. But he said 1968, this is around when the civil rights movement is at its height. And going on. So he's like, you can't say that, and now it's unacceptable. So now you got to use, he's basically saying you got to use coded language now. Coded language. Now instead of saying the N-word, now you just say, look, forced busing. Forced busing was where, they were trying to integrate the schools, and so they had blacks, they would bus the blacks into white neighborhoods to go to school with whites to integrate. So now you use that kind of language. Instead of saying, like you said, now you say, well, look, the fourth busing is a problem. And state rights and all that. When, this is, again, having to connect when the southern states were trying to deny blacks, their rights in these states. And the federal government was trying to get them to stop it and implement and allow blacks their constitutional rights. They made this an issue of state rights. So that's what he's saying, that they had to start to use coded language, Candace. The Southern strategy was and is real, and it's used today, and it has been used for several decades. There are many examples, even through the 80s and 90s, where the Southern strategy was used, even if it wasn't for the South. Whether they used it, up in the North. There's examples where they used it in the North. There's an example in the North that was called the Willie Horton ad, right? Look at that. Look up the Willie Horton ad, and you'll see what the Willie Horton ad was about. Where the Republicans used that. They used that example, and a number of other examples. Or they play the affirmative action card. I remember there was a billboard that showed they made it seem like whites were being treated unfairly, and it had like an affirmative action thing with a red, black, and green color flag on it, and make it look like, look, black people are getting ahead, but when they're getting ahead, it's hurting you. So in other words, vote for the candidate that's against affirmative action. So they did stuff like that. They did little things like that to cater against to white. And this was happening in the South and the North, right? Through the 80s and the 90s. So the Southern strategy has always been real, Candace. I'm sorry that if you were ignorant about it, shameful, and if you intentionally made that claim up, even more so a shame. But let's continue listening to Lee Atwater.
And all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than Nigger Nigger, So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
All right.
My team and I.
So, this man, Lee Atwater, is very famous. They called him a brutal Republican strategist and consultant. So he was the one that, he helped a lot of these the Republican candidates in setting up their strategies and when they were running for election. And as you heard, he said that's how they used that's how they employed the Southern strategy. And this is where the Republican Party betrayed black people. This is where they betrayed black people and left us high and dry. And the Democratic Party started playing the nice guys. Again, like I said, we talked about that before. They played the nice guy. But again, in reality, their strategy seems to be benign neglect, right? Benign neglect, or talk a lot but do nothing for us. That's been their strategy. But as I said, this is where the Republican Party betrayed us. And this is why ever since then, black people predominantly vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. And that's unfortunate as well, because we haven't realized. I think we're starting to realize that now. Black voters are starting to wisen up and waking up, and we're beginning to realize that now any candidate who claims they want our vote, you're gonna have to give us some tangibles. Whether you're a Green Party, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, Democrat, you want the black vote. The black American voters are demanding tangibles now. No more lip service, no more talk, no more eating fried chicken and playing basketball and claiming that you listen to rap. That's not working anymore, right? That's not working anymore. So I'm happy to see that. But in this case here, this is where the Republican Party betrayed black America when they turned to the Southern strategy. And so, Candace, you lied. You were totally wrong that it was a myth and that it never happened. It definitely happened, and that was Mr. Lee Atwater admitting it, that it's real. He's admitting that's the strategy that they use. You heard it. He said they had to use coded words. They had to use coded words and bring up issues that, as he said, would hurt black people more. He said, you heard him say it. He said these things would hurt black people more. But why? But why? It would hurt black people more. But what? Make white voters happy, right? Make white racist voters, white bigoted voters. It would make them happy because through the coded language, they understood that yes, these things would hurt black people. Okay, Candace. So I'm sorry that you were misinformed or you outright lied. But the Southern strategy definitely was and is real. There's no denying that fact. Okay, Candace, no denying that fact. All right, so you need to either get your information correct or stop lying for these people. You're trying to get a check, but really, at the cost of selling your soul. At the cost of selling your are you really that hung up on trying to get fame and money that you're willing to sell your? Obviously you are, because you're obviously you've taken the job already. You're doing the job, and that's sad and that's shameful. That's really sad and that's shameful. But your information is completely wrong, Candace, about the Southern strategy. Okay, completely wrong. So, you know, and also too the reality of the rise, because that was another thing that was talked about in the hearing from your side, where you tried to downplay the reality of the rise of, I mean, you know, and I wouldn't even say rise. I mean, it's always been here. Yeah, it's getting more out in the open under Trump, but you know, white bigotry, white racism has always been in America, right? It just, you know, like the Southern strategy, it too had to become coded. They knew they couldn't be blatant anymore. They knew they couldn't have the signs that say, you know, no Negroes allowed, or whites only, or no coloreds, you know. So they too had to become would use a type of Southern strategy and become coded now, where they couldn't blatantly do these things, so they became coded. But you also in the hearing tried to downplay the reality by bringing your grandfather. So okay, that's your grandfather. That's your grandfather's individual experience. The reality says otherwise. The reality says that white racism is here and has been here. I mean, and that's another perfect example of cooning too. As if your grandfather's individual experience negates the reality of white racism here in America. I mean, come on, Candace, really? You know, I mean, like, wow, that's, I mean, there's no other way to explain it except outright cooning. You playing the Sambo role to a T. You know? Look, so let's deal with that. Let's talk about and show some of this stuff here. And you know what? This is not new, by the way, people. Right? This is not new about this here. This is not new. Right? This is going back to about 2009. Right? Right around the time when Obama became president, that we see that they were talking about this back then. Right, and once again, even back then, this is before Candace Owens before we knew who she was, right? The GOP wanted to downplay it back then as well. So here they are doing it again. But look, even back, this is the article going back where it talks about how, you know, the GOP wanted to ignore the rise of right-wing extremism and white nationalism, white racism in America. And rather to focus on Muslim group, right? So this article here talks about this, where it says back in 2009, it says, remember in 2009, right at the start of the Obama era, when then Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, issued a report entitled Right-Wing Extremism, Current Economic and Political Climate Fueling Resurgence in Radicalization and Recruitment. The report was truly prescient. It says it alerted us to the rise of right-wing extremism, such as from white supremacist groups, and warned that unchecked it could lead to violence, which of course is the violence that we have been seeing. These guys going up in mosque. Yes, it happened here, not just in New Zealand. There was a guy, he went into he thought it was a mosque. He went into a Sikh temple back in, like, what was that? I think that was like 2012, 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. He went into a Sikh temple. He thought it was a mosque, and he shot up the place. So this was before the New Zealand shooter did his thing, right? We saw what happened with Dylan Roof. We saw what happened with the guy who went into the synagogue in Pennsylvania. We saw the guy who went into, what was it, a Kroger or whatever, and he shot the old black man, old black lady, right? So, you know, this has been going on. It's been going on over the years. And we're starting to see that. But they've been talking about this back then. And back then, the GOP, the Republicans, the conservatives, they wanted to downplay it as well. They wanted to ignore it. Obviously, these are their people, right? It appears that they're doing this because these are their people, right? That's their base. And so they don't want to upset their base by acknowledging and perhaps implementing laws that would punish these people. So they want to downplay it. So it says, how did Republicans respond? It says they went ballistic, attacking the report. John Boehner was especially upset with Napolitano, that Napolitano would use the term terrorist to describe American citizens who disagree with the direction Washington Democrats are taking our nation, adding, using such broad-based generalizations about the American people is simply outrageous. Well, what have we seen since 2010? An explosion in the number of hate groups and a rash of domestic terrorist acts committed by those very right-wing groups Napolitano warned us about. So, you know, and yeah, we see it. And then there is the, you know, of course, over the years, you know, a lot of people have started to become more vocal and upset about police brutality and police misconduct. And we see that the FBI warned us about that as well, right? The FBI warned of white supremacists in law enforcement 10 years ago, right? Has anything changed? 10 years ago, the FBI was talking about the threat of white supremacists infiltrating law enforcement. Now, of course, black people, we've been saying this for years. I mean, the black community being upset with police brutality and accusing the police department of racism is not new. This has been, you can see pictures of Malcolm X holding up a newspaper. And what was on the cover? Police brutality, racist police brutality. What was the catalyst that created the Black Panthers, the original Black Panthers? Again, what was it? Racist police brutality. So this has been going, this is not anything new, right? This is not anything new. This has been going on. You see? It's not nothing new. They, you know, and then in the 80s we had what? The NWA with F the police. Why? Because of the same thing. Police harassment, racist police. So this is not anything new. We've been talking about this. The only difference now is that we have the proof. Now we have the video footage, the camera footage to show that, you know, these incidents. But we've been talking about this for years, going back to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X days, talking about police brutality, racist police brutality. The Black Panthers in the 60s, racist police brutality. The 80s, racist police brutality. Again, that's what made NWA make the song "F the Police." Because it's been going on. The only difference now is that now we have the footage. Now we have video evidence to show when these incidents take place and what we've been saying, right? What we've been saying for decades. But the FBI warned and talked about this 10 years ago. So I'm sorry, Candace, you trying to downplay it to protect your people is, again, shameful and sad on your part. That you basically are a sellout. You really have sold out. I mean, you are a blatant example of a black traitor, a black racist, a black sellout, right? You have really sold out to these people to have the nerve to come to this hearing and act like, you know, it's just a big ploy, it's just a big myth. And this is not, and this is not in support of the Democrats, because like I said, I already talked about how the Democrats, we're starting to wake up. Black people are waking up and realizing that the Democrats have never really been our friends either, with their benign neglect policies and our policies of doing nothing. So this is not in support of them. This is not about liberalism or conservative, you know, or whatever. This is not. I don't roll with any of them. I'm independent. That's why I call it the Black Independent, because I don't roll with any of these people. Right? We don't roll with it. We just call it like it is. We deal with the reality of what we're facing. We're not rocking with the Democrats, with the liberals, none of that. We're independent. That's why the name of this channel is the Black Independent. But so as I said, you know, law enforcement, the FBI talked about this, and then we've seen over the years that you know what has been happening. Right? We've seen that you know, over the years, police officers, police stations have been exposed, sending racist emails to each other, racist tweets. Police officers have been exposed with, you know, white nationalist Nazi tattoos on their bodies and stuff like that, right? It was exposed that in LA, you know, some of the Los Angeles police officers formed some kind of racist gang. You know what I'm saying? So right here in this part of the article right here, it says the FBI detailed the threat of white nationalists and skinheads infiltrating police in order to disrupt investigations against fellow members and recruit other supremacists. The bulletin was released during a period of scandal for many law enforcement agencies throughout the country, including a neo-Nazi gang formed by members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, who harassed black and Latino communities. But again, we've been talking about this. NWA talked about it. Public Enemy talked about it. X-Clan talked about it. Go back to the Panthers. They were talking about it. Malcolm X was talking about it. Right? But now that, you know, I guess, how can I put it? Now it's being exposed. Now what we've been talking about is being proven. It's not just a theory anymore, right? It's not just theorized. It's not just conspiracy theories. The reality of it has been exposed, so much so that even the FBI had to admit it, right? Even the FBI had to admit it, okay? As we said, some of the police officers were found out to be members of groups, members of the Ku Klux Klan. Here we see problems with white supremacist law enforcement have surfaced since this report. In 2014, 2 Florida officers, including a deputy police chief, were fired after an FBI informant outed them as members of the Ku Klux Klan. It marked the second time within 5 years that the agency uncovered an officer's membership in the Ku Klux Klan. This is dangerous, people. And Candace had the nerve to go to the damn hearing and act like this is not, you know, this is all a myth. This is all some type of Democratic ploy. No, Candace, this had nothing to do with them. This is the Democrats or the liberals. This is reality. For you to do that, that's wow. I mean, wow. That shows that you deserve to be called a coon. You deserve to be called a Sambo, a traitor, a sellout. You deserve it. You got up in there to distract and try to take away from the reality that we are facing, the danger of these white supremacists. So as you can see, the FBI said they're infiltrating. Who knows what other parts of the government they're infiltrating, right? We've already seen some of these senators, right? What's the one, King, Steve King, whatever. We already see that some of these senators have these ideas. We've already seen that some of these governors, when they were running, some of the stuff they were exposed saying. So they don't have to wear the sheets. They don't have to put on Nazi uniforms, right? Because there are people who are running for office who have these ideologies. Police officers, as we see here, infiltrating. This is very dangerous for you to be playing down, trying to downplay it, and trying to be the blackface for white nationalists, Candace. That's really shameful and sad. Really shameful and sad. Really shameful and sad. I remember too, it was exposed about Ferguson. Ferguson, you know, where Mike Brown got killed. That was exposed too. That department was exposed that they were targeting, you know, the black community in particular, you know, giving them more tickets and stuff like that. You know, and they, of course, you know, they knew that these communities were economically strapped. So they're making it hard on them, giving them, you know, writing them more tickets than usual, disproportionate amount of tickets and all the stuff like that. So the reality is that it's there, and it's not just the out and outright racist and white supremacists and white nationalists. It's our politicians. It's judges. It's prosecutors and DAs. It's police officers. So I'm sorry, Candace, but the reality is that it's not something that the Democrats have made up or the liberals have made up to scare us. The fact is, it's a reality. If they exploited that, that's on them, but it's still a reality that we have to face. And shame on you for going to this hearing trying to downplay that. Shame on you for trying to be, you know, for taking this job to be the black face, to cover for white nationalism and white racism. It's sad, Candace. Really, really sad. Really sad and shameful that you would do that. But again, as I said, you know, the reality is that she was completely wrong about the Southern strategy. She lied. I'm not even going to be nice. She lied. You lied, Candace. The Southern strategy was not a myth. It did, in fact, happen. And it is still used to this day. All right. If you are truly ignorant, Candace, then I suggest you read up on Lee Atwater and listen to that interview where he talked about it, as you heard the clip that I played. All right. So on that, family, we're going to end it. If you want to support the Black Independent, there is a link in the description of this video where right now, because the channel is fairly new, I don't have the super chat. So if you want to donate and support this channel, you can go to my PayPal, which is provided in the description area of this video. All right. So I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode of The Black Independent, where we address and refute the lie that Candace Owens told about the Southern strategy.